Chapter 1 The Town and the Perfect Facade. In the heart of Tennessee in 1851, the small town of Cedar Grove radiated an easy charm. Its cobblestone streets wound between a mix of modest homes and colonial-style houses, their white walls shimmering against the backdrop of deep blue mountains that cradled this quiet community. The townsfolk were friendly as they gathered in the square, exchanging stories and laughter. On the surface, Cedar Grove appeared perfect, a postcard illustration of pastoral life. But beneath the surface lay unsettling currents as we delved into the lives of its residents. The Green family was at the center of it all. Timothy Green, known for his booming laughter and welcoming nature, operated a small farm on the town's edge. His wife, Margaret, was revered for her culinary prowess and kind gestures. However, behind the bright curtains of their homestead, neighbors began to whisper about more peculiar goings-on. Despite Timothy's jovial public persona, there were hushed conversations about shadows that loomed within the walls of their home. When I spoke with Anna Riley, a neighbor and schoolteacher, she recalled an incident at the annual Harvest Festival. Timothy seemed different that day, she said, visibly concerned. There was an edge to his laughter, as if something was gnawing at him. I couldn't articulate it, but I had a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. The town had an indelible charm that seemed to clutch at the edges of people's hearts. However, it also carried an ancient pulse that reverberated with unease. A local historian, Mr. Baxter, shared the folklore that haunted Cedar Grove, tales passed down through generations. There are stories about rituals that date back to the early settlers, things that congeal beneath the veneer of civility, he recounted, a distant look in his eyes. It was moments like these that made me wonder what lay behind the pristine facades of Cedar Grove. Was there a dark undercurrent raging beneath the surface, a history that refused to relinquish its hold on the present? As whispers rippled through the community, I sensed that something more sinister awaited discovery. Chapter 2 The Cracks Appear. As I continued my exploration, the murmurings surrounding the Green family grew louder and the signs of distress more vivid. Children began attending school bearing uncharacteristic shadows in their eyes. Young Sarah, Timothy's daughter, used to brim with excitement as she recounted her day. Now she often sat at her desk, looking as though she had misplaced a piece of herself. "I saw her the other day," said one classmate, a bright boy named Jacob. "She was playing in the yard, but she kept looking at the cellar like someone was watching her." These accounts began to weave an unsettling narrative as many pupils echoed Jacob's observation. It planted a seed of doubt within the community, feeding suspicions that previously lay dormant. Among the adults, questions flourished. I met with elderly Martha Henderson, who was known for her extensive knowledge of local lore. She leaned in closer, her weathered hands trembling slightly. "There have been reports, sightings near the Greens' property. A flickering light at night, strange chanting, things the good Lord wouldn't condone," she warned, as if revealing forbidden knowledge. As whispers grew, so did my determination to uncover what lay beneath the surface of Cedar Grove. I turned my focus toward the cellar of the Green home, an unassuming exterior concealing the possible epicenter of the family's disturbing secrets. Timothy often boasted about his self-sustaining lifestyle, but a nagging feeling plagued me that the simplicity was merely a mask for something far more grotesque. Late one evening, I decided to visit the property under the guise of gathering information for a piece on local agriculture. The crisp autumn air filled with a scent of fallen leaves, I approached the Green farm, revealing shadows from the northern edge of the moon. The house stood like a silent sentinel, its windows darkened. As I drew closer, I noticed the cellar door partially ajar, an invitation shrouded in darkness. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, I stepped cautiously inside. The atmosphere was sour, as if the air itself were thick with whispered secrets. My heart raced as I scoured the room, the walls adorned with ancient tools and an unsettling sense of neglect. But the sight that caught my breath and sent a shiver down my spine was a narrow channel etched into the ground, a darkened stain that exuded an unmistakable visceral scent. A sound broke the stillness, footsteps echoing from above, the unmistakable voice of Timothy. Panic surged through me. I ducked into the shadows, heart pounding, as his form filled the doorway for just a moment before he hurried out. Being sure to remain unseen, I listened intently. "There was no choice," Timothy murmured to himself, his voice barely audible. "They have to be silenced, no one must know." Those chilling words lingered in my mind as I slinked out of the cellar, bringing with me an impending sense of dread. I now held a fragile thread that would pull on the fabric of Cedar Grove, revealing the complex interplay between the familiar and the inexplicably horrid. Across the town, tension ratcheted up like a taut string, as the townsfolk remained blissfully unaware that the peace they cherished was poised on the brink of terror. Chapter 3 The Breaking Point. Weeks passed. The unease surrounding the Green family intensified, the darkness exuding from their abode now palpable. Rumors surged through the square like wildfire. The matter grew more alarming when young Sarah Green went missing one fateful day and was nowhere to be found. Parents held onto their children tightly, the mothers casting anxious glances towards the Greens' home, their laughter muffled by anxiety. "I can't believe they would allow that young girl to wander off," Anna Riley scolded as she helped organize a search party. A palpable tension settled over Cedar Grove, binding every soul in the community. What began as a routine search soon turned desperate. Timothy's jovial demeanor had all but vanished, replaced with a fervent anxiety that only fueled suspicion. "They must be hiding something," one mother in hushed tones shared with me as I joined the search efforts. "I swear I saw Timothy headed to the cellar just a few nights ago and I heard chanting." Her voice trembled at the thought, fear gripping her heart. Having witnessed Timothy's odd behavior firsthand and feeling the atmosphere of Cedar Grove crack beneath the surface, I returned to the Green residence that evening under the light of the moon. Each creak of the floorboards below matched my pounding heart as I edged toward the cellar once more. Armed with my resolve, I hoped to uncover whether the truth was tucked away like weeds in a garden. As I entered the cellar, the darkness enveloped me. With each step deeper inside, the air shifted, heavy and oppressive. There, illuminated by a flickering lantern light, I stumbled upon something surreal, a gathering of townsfolk dressed in dark garments, their faces obscured. At the center of the room, the sight that met my eyes chilled me to the bone, an altar laden with remnants of sacrifice. Freshly collected dark stains covered the surroundings, and I understood the realization that washed over me. They practiced rituals buried in the town's history, and Sarah was their latest offering. Before I could think to retreat, one figure turned sharply toward me. It was Timothy, and his eyes gleamed with a manic fervor. "You shouldn't have come here," he growled, his voice coiling around me like tendrils of smoke. "You've breached our sanctuary." Panic surged within me as I stumbled back, heart racing against my ribs. The voices around me grew louder, chanting a litany filled with urgency and madness. I turned to run, but before I could escape, something or someone caught my ankle, pulling me down into the chaos. The twisted ritual and frantic screams echoed in harmony, and I could only summon the strength to wedge free, barreling toward the exit. I emerged from the cellar, gasping for breath, conviction planted firmly within me. The people of Cedar Grove needed to know what was happening beneath their feet, what lay hidden behind the facade, those kinds of horrors that bled from their shielded sanctum. The chaos of that night lingered in the stillness, marking the town's precipice as the townsfolk began to question their very foundations. Timothy Green and the facade he had meticulously constructed would soon unravel, and amidst the storm they had brewed, no one in Cedar Grove would remain untouched. Chapter 4: The Truth Uncovered. The days following the chaotic scene in the Green's cellar were rife with tension, as the anxiety in Cedar Grove ripened into palpable fear. Burdened by the horror I had witnessed, I made it my mission to rally the townspeople, urging them to break free from their complacency and confront the darkness that lingered within their midst. "People need to know," I implored Mrs. Riley during a tense town hall meeting, my voice rising above hushed murmurs. "These rituals are not mere folklore. Timothy Green has thrust us into a nightmare." But skepticism hung thick. Many resisted even that possibility. Fear often wraps around one's reason like a vine, squeezing the breath from any voice that dares speak of threats too great to confront. Anna leaned in closer, her voice firmer than before. "The idea that Timothy would harm his own, foul things reside in our stories, but we can't condemn based on allegations alone." Yet even as she spoke, the tension was tangible, simmering like the deep roots of dread digging deeper into Cedar Grove. At that moment, I realized that the minds shut tight by deception needed more than words. They required proof, a tangible embodiment of truth that could break through their layering fears. With the town embroiled in reluctance, I decided to turn to the archives of Cedar Grove's history, consulting the dusty tome of records kept in the library. As I sifted through pages yellowing with time, a revelation surfaced. A cryptic mention of an ancient cult of settlers who believed rituals appeased the spirits of the land by demanding offerings in exchange for favors granted to the community. While uncovering proclamations of times long forgotten, I came across faded journals that provided accounts of clandestine gatherings, detailing chilling methods used to bind followers' loyalty to the cult. The writings painted a picture of an unyielding grip that often engaged in horrific sacrifices. The culmination of my findings led back to Timothy Green, the lineage of his family roots extending deep into Cedar Grove's sinister past. I gathered a group of concerned residents and presented my painstakingly acquired evidence. The past has lingered within us, festering in shadows, I declared passionately, revealing the evidence as eyes widened and voices gasped. Timothy Green's rituals targeting our children, these horrors repeat themselves in silence. My pleas resonated like a beacon, pulling their suffering hearts toward accountability, igniting a fire of concern that had long been buried beneath the weight of fear. As I led them to the Green residence, a chain reaction ignited, and the townsfolk gathered in force, their determination buoyed by the revelations of our collective history. The arrival of this cohort rattled the very foundations of the Green home. Timothy emerged, panic rippling across his features. "You don't understand, this is for our prosperity," he shouted desperately. But our fortitude solidified as one by one, parents shared their fears openly, confronting the horror Timothy had long reigned over. "We will no longer remain silent," Anna pressed forward, her voice steady. That electrifying moment buoyed my heart. Together, they called for accountability, ready to expose the darkness that tainted their town. Chapter 5: The Raid and Reckoning. As the fire of determination raged within Cedar Grove, residents unified under a singular purpose: to put an end to Timothy Green's grip over the town. A convoy of local law enforcement joined our ranks, bearing the weight of justice they were ready to dispense. The air crackled with tension, anticipation hanging like thick fog as we descended upon the Green household, emboldened by the collective truth unearthed from deep within Cedar Grove. The atmosphere shifted dangerously as the officers approached the door, forcing their way inside. As they entered, the scene unveiled itself as an abomination, a living embodiment of rituals both ancient and grotesque. From the cellar below, the evidence of sacrifices laid scattered throughout the grisly chamber, upon which Timothy and his dedicated followers had strived to uphold the grip of the past. Hours unfolded in chaotic succession as officers gathered evidence, documenting the remnants of an abhorrent dark legacy. They emerged with grim expressions, echoing the horror that gripped the town. Throughout the unfolding chaos, I witnessed Timothy's facade shatter, his laughter replaced with wailings of despair, a man suddenly stripped bare of control. "Please don't take her," he pleaded, eyes darting wildly, glancing toward his home. "You don't understand." But his cries fell upon deaf ears, silencing the man who once held a chokehold over Cedar Grove. As officers placed him in handcuffs, I sensed an overwhelming sense of vindication surge through the townsfolk. However, the chaos marked a beginning, not an end. Timothy's arrest didn't bring back the innocence lost. The specter of those rituals still loomed heavily over the atmosphere. As worry transmuted into anger, townsfolk began to grapple with the realization of how deep this darkness had seeped into their lives. In the following weeks, a trial unfolded, a grim tableau play that exposed the extent of Timothy Green's culpability. The chilling testimonies of parents poured forth, artfully weaving the city's tapestry of sorrow and fear. They painted vivid images of moments before the rituals, connecting his actions to the very fabric of betrayal each family had endured. Even amid the anguish, some began to rally. A larger conversation about safety and advocacy reverberated through Cedar Grove. Lawmakers were beckoned to establish deeper community resources for preventing such horrors from unfurling again. Through resistance and wails for justice, Cedar Grove began the transformation from victimhood to renewal. With each court appearance and gathering, the tides shifted, bonding the community tighter together in shared purpose. Chapter 6: Legacy and Reflection. As the trial reached its conclusion, Cedar Grove began to stitch together the remnants of its anguish, working diligently to reclaim the innocence that had been stripped away. The trauma etched into every heart on that fateful day seemed to resonate through the echoes of the townsfolk's shared resolve, a reminder that darkness, even if rooted deep within, could no longer reside in silence. Timothy's conviction had sent ripples through the community, and the chantings that once haunted their lives now transformed into voices calling for protection, for advocacy, against those who had sought to exploit vulnerability. Cedar Grove emerged anew. Spirited discussions culminated in the establishment of a community watch and resources dedicated to child protection. At the base of the town square, a memorial was erected, honoring those innocent lives lost to the dark rituals. It served as a somber reminder, not just of what had transpired, but of the strength to confront these shadows and seek light even in the darkest of times. I stood at the memorial during its unveiling, surrounded by families who once cowered in silence. They shared their fears of the past but embraced a vision for the future, armed with newfound knowledge and solidarity, fortified against the darkness that would dare cross their threshold again. "Together we can protect this place," Anna spoke, her voice quaking slightly but filled with conviction. "Our past does not define us, this town will thrive." As the sun dipped below the horizon, illuminating the faces of Cedar Grove, I became acutely aware of the power of resilience. What had once stitched their lives into shadows now grew into a tapestry of hope, hearts converging in defiance of what had been. Ultimately, the innocence that had seemingly been lost began a new journey toward healing and vigilance. Because what hides behind the perfect smile can sometimes be an invitation for horror, buried deep beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to emerge. But within that darkness, the courage to address it can sculpt a future, brightened by the strength of community and an insatiable desire for truth. Chapter 1: The Town in the Perfect Facade. Cedar Grove was a realm where whispers clung to the wind, where evening twilight cast long shadows over cobblestone streets and hid secrets under the graceful boughs of ancient oaks. It was a place where time seemed to slow, allowing the rhythm of life to sway gently like the grass in summer. But beneath its charming appearance lay the murmur of darkness, an unease simmering beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of reckoning. Timothy Green and his family had woven themselves into the heart of Cedar Grove. Known for their hospitality, the Greens hosted harvest picnics and holiday gatherings, their laughter echoing through the town square. Yet for every story of conviviality, a shadow lingered. As I began my investigations, I learned that Mrs. Green had grown increasingly distant over the years, her warm smile often turning to a ghost of a frown when she set her sights on her children. In a town where everyone knew one another, I sought out whispers that could illuminate the dark corners of the Greens' home. The whispers were tantalizing, curling in on themselves. Anna Riley, a local teacher and a kindred spirit, recounted encounters that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I once caught a glimpse into their yard and there were strange things, a circle of stones and a fire pit that hadn't been used for cooking. She hesitated, her eyes darting away as if afraid to speak aloud, the words swirling in her mind. "I've heard things, you know, at night, strange songs that make the hair on my arms stand up." The shoreline of normalcy began to erode in Cedar Grove. The townsfolk spoke of bizarre occurrences where children seemed to vanish for hours only to return with distant stares, engulfed in a silence that surpassed their tender ages. Yet, the reluctance to grasp the darkness remained palpable. It was as if they feared acknowledging the truth would invite it further into their lives. Joshua, a retired farmer and longtime resident, reflected, "There are dark practices that come from old ways, things we thought forgotten. The old stories should be buried deep." His voice quivered slightly, echoing the tremors of lingering fear. My resolve began to cement as I pieced together disparate fragments, kids mumbling about rituals and their parents' hesitations to mention the Greens. For every jovial face I encountered, there were flickers of dread dancing in the corners of their eyes. Cedar Grove, with its lovely facades and good-natured folks, stood at the precipice of revelation. Little did they know the web weaved within their community hid a story much darker than their hopes would allow. Chapter 2: The Cracks Appear. The atmosphere in Cedar Grove was beginning to fray. Rumors thickened like clouds bruising the sky, and children drifted around the edges of their games, their laughter hollow and strained. Sarah Green, once bright and lively, had slipped into an unfamiliar demeanor, her gaze often glazing over as if she were submerged in thoughts too mature for her tender years. At school, I caught glimpses of her sitting alone on a swing, her fingers tracing the chain as if attempting to conjure the laughter that seemed to have been stolen from her. "She used to tell me everything," whispered Mia, one of Sarah's former playmates. "Now she hardly speaks. Sometimes I think she's scared." Echoes of concern spread beyond just the children. I sought counsel with Mrs. Henderson, the town's elder who had witnessed the rise and fall of Cedar Grove over the decades. "There are patterns to darkness," she warned, her voice rasping with age. "When families start to isolate, we must take heed. Sacrifices happen in silence, masked by charity. A child's laughter should never be met with fear." Despite the warnings, a collective sense of denial permeated through the community. The more I pressed for insights, the more I felt a reluctance wafting in the air like the scent of overcooked stew. Tim Green's charm still held sway, even as shadows crept closer. It was enough to placate those who yearned for comfort. Yet the unease thrived. I watched Timothy's demeanor shift, he grew harsher with his children. I found myself retreating to the fringes of the community, gathering more whispers among those willing to share while clinging to a sense of caution. As autumn winds swept through Cedar Grove, they carried with them an urgency I couldn't ignore. I feared what lay hidden behind the perfectly painted exteriors of the Green family home. During nights that bled into early mornings, I heard whispers that magnified my dread, community members recounting events that once seemed harmless now tangled within a web of malevolence. What happened here? I pondered aloud one evening to Joshua over a cup of coffee, the steam rising like whispers attempting to lift the veil of silence. What do you think is in that cellar? His eyes darkened and an acute tension gripped the table between us. Sometimes you don't want to know the answer, he replied, the weight of his voice bearing the truth I had been searching for. Somewhere beneath Cedar Grove, the past still resided within a shroud of forgotten rituals. Chapter 3 The Breaking Point. The breaking point finally arrived one ominous evening. A storm brewed overhead, shadows slashing through the townsfolk like knives. Sarah Green had vanished. A suffocating silence engulfed Cedar Grove as news spread from house to house, echoing in the alleyways. Parents clutched their children close, forgotten fears ignited by whispers of dread. In solidarity, the townspeople gathered in the town square by lantern light, forming a circle of hope tangled with fear. "We must search for her," Anna urged, her voice quaking yet strong. "We cannot let fear bind us to silence." Driven by purpose, the crowd mobilized, canvassing the familiar haunts of the children. The air tasted like rain and anxiety as we combed through the woods bordering the Green property. Hours dragged on, the looming dread knotting tightly in our stomachs until we stumbled across a clearing deeper within the woods. And there, submerged in the fading light, lay the infamous cellar door ajar, beckoning us forth. "This is where she's been," I heard myself muttering against the backdrop of pounding hearts as we knew what lay within. Timothy emerged from the darkness, his demeanor shifting from one of panic to defiance. "What are you doing here?" he barked, shielding the door with tangible intensity. "Where's Sarah?" Anna demanded, a tremor of authority lacing her voice. She turned her gaze toward the cellar, the ghost of the unknown flooding every corner of her heart. I could feel the townspeople surrounding us, their collective strength fueling the fire of courage that surged through me. Timothy's eyes darted with a mixture of fear and rage as the whispers of the town echoed louder around him. "Stay away," he shouted, but it was too late. With a gesture of solidarity, the townsfolk pressed closer, demanding answers and ensnared in the swirl of panic coursing through the air. "We will not be silenced," Anna shouted, capturing the hearts of everyone present. The tension crackled and snapped around us like a finely drawn bowstring, waiting for a moment of release. With a collective gasp, we surged toward the door where light slipped between the crack, illuminating the malevolence that festered below. Chapter 4 The Truth Uncovered. With a swift motion, I pushed past Timothy, the townsfolk flanking behind me as we barreled into the cellar. The cold air wrapped around us as we descended stairs coated in grime, the damp walls echoing the gasp of incredulous horror. What lay before us transformed fear into sheer disbelief. The stone chamber was adorned with arcane symbols. At the very center stood an altar, dark stains marking the ground beneath it. Instruments of both beauty and violence lay strewn about, knives glinting ominously in the lantern light, cloaks hanging like specters from nails on the wall. I could hardly breathe. The stench of something metallic, something wrong, surged through my nostrils. This wasn't mere folklore, it was a nightmare pulling on the threads of our very existence, disguising itself as ritual and tradition. We had unearthed a sinister truth weaving itself into the identities of the townsfolk, a darkness too potent to confront until now. "What has he done?" Anna gasped in disbelief, her hope rapidly diminishing as the shape of dread overwhelmed reason. The walls seemed to pulse with life around us, pulling us deeper into a history steeped in sinister practices. A cacophony of voices rose, echoing the cries of lost innocence as each person processed what they witnessed. Timothy stood frozen, the persona he had created shattering irrevocably, leaving only a shadow of a man trembling in the wake of exposed truth. "Sarah!" someone shouted from the recesses of the hidden darkness, shattering our collective horror. We surged toward a shadowed corner where the shape of the missing girl lay wrapped in a threadbare blanket. She stirred, eyes wide with confusion and fear, a vision of resilience spurring us on. As my heart thundered in my chest, I lifted Sarah, surrounded by the warmth of support holding her close. The town now stood united, their fear replaced with fury, igniting a thread of courage that had long lay dormant. We marched back, dragging Timothy into the light, the darkness had failed to reclaim its hold, and Cedar Grove would no longer remain mired in silence. The cry for justice gained momentum, transforming into lanterns of hope illuminating the town's past. What had once been hidden protocol began unraveling as townsfolk pledged to dismantle the grip of secrecy once and for all. Chapter 5 The Raid and Reckoning. With the town now alight with purpose, Cedar Grove prepared for the inevitable reckoning against the darkness that had so forcibly twisted itself into their lives. Timothy Green was left trembling in the wake of the unified uprising, his pleas turning to incoherent shouts as we presented the evidence before the authorities. The tavern that once saw joyful merriment began to host urgent meetings charged with determination. As officers arrived to investigate the now bustling Green residence, excitement mingled with apprehension. The streets filled with anxious townsfolk, an army of vigilant souls ready to confront the hidden malevolence entwining their community. I found myself in the crowd, my heart racing, grasping at the burgeoning belief that Cedar Grove could unearth its own vanquished truths. The sun reached its zenith by the time law enforcement smashed through the cellar door once more, searching for the horrors long silenced. I remained close behind, compelled by a need for closure and truth. The evidence gathered through the community's courage began to amplify into a chorus of voices demanding justice for Sarah and all the affected. Minutes felt like hours as officers pulled back layers of dark history, confronting the altar ringed with ominous relics. The echoes of Timothy's past reverberated through the very walls of the town, revealing links to ancient rituals long interred beneath the smooth surfaces of modern life. Those within dwindling shadows grasped their own complicity as they embarked on a path leading toward salvation. Timothy's authority faded and the town began to reshape its identity. Critics who were once paralyzed became the bellwethers of change. They rallied to change legislation, armed with the burden of knowledge. Individual stories began to intertwine, each thread contributing to a larger narrative of restoration and hope. As I stood amid the chaos, rainfall began to wash away the layers of deception encasing Cedar Grove. Evoking the power of a cleansing storm, it promised renewal. The bond of shared experience now united the townsfolk in their quest for healing. But the path was not without scars. Each heartbeat resonated with grief. We would remember Sarah Green, but not just as a symbol of loss but as a catalyst for transformation, a reminder that we all possess the ability to confront darkness regardless of the historical weight that draped over our shoulders. Chapter 6 Legacy and Reflection. In the months that followed, Cedar Grove began its slow recuperation. With Timothy Green in custody and charged with the heinous acts behind the secrecy of the cellar, the townsfolk looked at each other, united not only in shared grief but also in their resolve to shape the future. Memorials sprung up in the town square, a place that once embodied joy, now transformed into a sanctuary commemorating those lost to shadowy forces. As people gathered to reflect, the air felt lighter, infused with the essence of shared resilience. Each story told was like a seed planted firmly in the soil of their hearts. Children were now encouraged to speak freely, to express fears without worry, awakening dreams too long kept at bay. Behind the conventional smiles rested the knowledge of what they had triumphed over, and with vigilance an understanding that the past may linger but it does not have to dictate their destiny. Speaking at the memorial, Anna's voice rang confidently yet tenderly as she honored the souls lost and the spirits prevailing. We will keep the door to our hearts open, even when fear tries to pull it shut. We are a community forged in the fires of sorrow, but through that darkness we shall prevail. People gathered, embracing stories of old while igniting pathways toward new beginnings. The collective weight lifted, allowing Cedar Grove to breathe freely once more. As I sat on the edge of the square, watching children swing and run with laughter again, I pondered the unyielding nature of truth. The light established in Cedar Grove would shine bright into its shadows, a beacon of hope for future generations. What once lay buried may never fully fade, but the scars we bear would remind us always to look closer, to listen deeply, and to stand in solidarity against the darkness. Because what hides behind a perfect smile might just lead to the communion of strength, awakening from the depths of concealed sorrow. This is Cedar Grove, a town resurrected not just from darkness but born anew, unified and resolute in facing whatever may come. Their past does not define them, today they cultivate joy and vigilance in the light of hope and renewal. Chapter 1 The Town and the Perfect Facade. In the heart of Cedar Grove, where the Tennessee hills embraced the horizon, a seemingly idyllic life flourished. The town was a tapestry of rustic charm, woven tightly with smiles, laughter, and shared meals. Yet even amidst the picturesque homes adorned with flower boxes, shadows lingered like a quiet storm waiting to burst. Timothy Green was a figure of authority, his sun-kissed hair and booming laughter making him a pillar in the community. He operated a farm on the outskirts, known for his generous heart and unwavering commitment to his family. His wife Margaret exuded warmth, her baking often the highlight of community gatherings. Yet beneath the facade of congeniality, subtle signs hinted at something amiss. The whisperings began quietly, barely perceptible to the untrained ear. I spoke with Anna Riley, a well-regarded schoolteacher. "You know," she said cautiously, "there's something unsettling in the way Timothy speaks to his children. They're never allowed to be just kids, always hushed, always fearful." As whispers multiplied, the weight of the unknown grew heavier. The children of Cedar Grove began to draw back, their laughter dulled. Sarah Green, once a vibrant participant in schoolyard games, had taken to wandering the fields behind her home alone, her demeanor increasingly pensive. "There's a change in her," one classmate mentioned. "Sarah keeps looking toward the woods, it's as if something is pulling her away." I couldn't help but wonder if those woods concealed more than just their gnarled trees. As I roamed the cobblestone streets in search of answers, I encountered Abigail, an elderly woman revered for her wisdom. "This town carries history, it clings to the soil like weeds," she warned, her voice raspy with years of knowing. "We shouldn't be afraid to confront what lies beneath the surface. Sometimes it's more than we can see." The signs began to conjure a narrative of foreboding, an uneasy feeling tinged with dread wrapping around me like a cold cloak. The welcoming smiles transformed into masks concealing unsettling truths. For a town so closely knit, the unspoken horrors threatened to unravel the bonds that held them together. Chapter 2: The Cracks Appear. The cracks in Cedar Grove began to show as the whispers of concern morphed into a chilling chorus. Children frequently arrived at school with vacant expressions, their eyes holding stories too heavy to be shared. Sarah Green's persistent absence from the laughter-laden playground became a topic of hushed conversation. "Something's off with the Greens, don't you think?" I pressed further during discussions with concerned parents. They were once the heart of the town. Lisa, another mother who had often invited the Greens to gatherings, hesitated. "I heard strange noises coming from their property at night, like chanting. It feels off, like they're involved in something we don't understand." The rhythm of life continued, but the familiar cadence became tinged with suspicion. I made my way to the local library, scouring archives for any hints of historical darkness that might illuminate the present. As I rifled through dusty tomes, I stumbled upon mentions of a shadowy past, a legacy of rituals among early settlers, rumblings of sacrificial rites intended to safeguard the land. The more I uncovered, the heavier the pall of dread settled over me. I sought out Mrs. Henderson again, eager for more context. "There's a mountain of folklore tucked away in this town, tales lost in the echoes of laughter," she shared, the weight of her words settling unhappily in the corners of my mind. "We must remain vigilant. Dark practices can emerge anew, masquerading as devotion." As the sunlight faded, I joined a gathering at the town hall. Mothers and fathers convened to address Sarah's ongoing absence. The air crackled with anxiety, voices weaving a narrative of fear as those in attendance began to vocalize their discomfort. "Something must be wrong," one father declared, his voice echoing down the hall. "The old stories, they're creeping in again." I sensed that clarity was imperative. I had become entwined in the heart of Cedar Grove. With determination coursing through my veins, I resolved to confront Timothy Green directly, the keeper of the secrets pulsing like a heartbeat within the town. Chapter 3: The Breaking Point. As days rolled into weeks, the weight of Sarah Green's absence bore down like leaden rain clouds, draping Cedar Grove in despair. The rhythm of family life grew quieter, parents tightened their grasp on their children, feverishly cautioning against wandering too near the Green property. Compelled by an urgent need for truth, I crossed the threshold into uncharted territory. One moonlit night, I made my way to the Green farm, intent on uncovering what lurked beneath the gilded gate. I pushed the wooden door open, the hinges groaning like a warning. Inside, darkness loomed, and I barely had time to comprehend the silence before it swept me into its thrall. As I guided my lantern through the dim chamber, unease settled into my bones. The cellar door, just beyond the kitchen, was ajar, creaking gently as though beckoning me closer. Feeling an electric thrill of both terror and intrigue, I took a step forward. Voices, strangely melodic yet ominous, seeped from below. "There's something wrong," I whispered, dread surging within. Fighting against an instinct to retreat, I pressed forward, my heart pounding as I stepped into the stairwell. Shadows danced along the walls, growing deeper as I descended. What I witnessed would etch itself into my memory. Timothy Green stood at the center of an altar, surrounded by a ring of people draped in dark hoods. Symbols I recognized from the historical texts adorned the ground, the very rituals I had read about but long thought extinct. "He is the one," a voice echoed from the crowd, eyes wide as if possessed. "For the land, we must offer our sacrifice." Panic surged through me as I understood the gravity of the situation. They weren't weaving folklore, they were practicing it. I turned to flee, but Timothy's eyes met mine, burning with an intensity I'd never seen. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, closing the distance between us with alarming speed. I bolted back through the shadows, urgency surging through my veins. The perception of normalcy crumbled in my wake, and as I burst into the moonlit night, I knew Cedar Grove's dance with darkness had only just begun. Chapter 4: The Truth Uncovered. The air outside was brisk against my skin, but the chill I felt was not purely from the night. I plunged through the dense woods, skirting the edges of the Green property, heart pounding wildly in my chest. Those rituals I had stumbled upon were the very sediment of fear embedded in Cedar Grove, a persistent history that refused to fade. As I reached the town, I could feel the pulse of something greater, the storm of emotions ready to break. I gathered together the few I knew could understand, hoping to rouse them to action. I approached Anna first. "Timothy Green, a cult. They're conducting dark rituals, Anna. We need to expose this." Her eyes widened, reflecting my urgency. "We cannot let this go unnoticed, we must confront him." With people rallying around me, we organized a meeting. The town hall buzzed with anticipation, eyes locking as the invisible thread of dread we'd felt began to tighten around the room. I spoke fervently, relaying everything I had seen, feeling that power seep through me like new vines reclaiming the land. "This isn't a story, it's a warning. Cedar Grove has culture festering below, and we must confront it or lose ourselves in the shadows." Murmurs threaded through the crowd, a mix of disbelief and fear. A proud local farmer stood up, leaning into the gathering. "Why should we trust you? What proof do you have?" I drew in a deep breath. "I will provide you with the truth, evidence of his rituals, and more importantly, his grip over our children. We must act swiftly." With that, a silent agreement took shape among the townsfolk. As night fell once more, a group gathered to march toward the Green farm. The lanterns we carried flickered against the oppressive darkness, igniting the spirit of Texan resolve within us. We arrived at Timothy's doorstep, the atmosphere taut with anticipation. "He will not escape tonight," I proclaimed as we gathered outside the door, heart rate sinking with the collective determination permeating the air. As we pounded on the door, Timothy emerged, face pale and eyes wild. "What are you doing here?" He tried to suppress his panic, but the walls behind him bore witness to truths he could no longer hide. The townspeople surged forward with me leading, unwilling to back down. "We demand to know the truth, Timothy," I shouted, pushing against his walls of deceit, their sturdy confidence shaking under scrutiny. That night would change Cedar Grove forever, a turning point forcing a town to confront the shadows that had long haunted them. Our determination for justice rang out against the silence, while the night deepened with the promise of revelation poised to shake the very roots of our community. Chapter 5: The Raid and Reckoning. The following days became a storm of preparation, galvanizing Cedar Grove as we braced ourselves for the reckoning to come. Authorities set off in the wake of our discovery, armed with the evidence we had gathered, while we armed ourselves with knowledge and a shared commitment to purge the darkness roaming our land. In a final standoff, a team of law enforcement officers converged on the Green property. I stood at the forefront, flanked by the townsfolk, anxiety pulsing through the air like electricity. "We will expose him," I vowed, gripping the arm of Anna as we faced the looming darkness together. With a swift motion, officers forced the door open, revealing the chaos within. The connections between Timothy's hidden rituals and the sacrifices remained stark against the backdrop of his home. Lanterns now illuminated the sinister practices beneath the veneer of small-town life, sending ripples of horror through the onlookers as they witnessed the altar. Timothy's demeanor transformed as the truth unfurled, the panic transforming to violent desperation. "You don't understand, this is for the good of the town," he shouted, his voice cracking against the weight of despair. "They're safe here." In that moment, everything unraveled. Behind the shriek of thunder, the townsfolk rallied together in defiance. They stepped forward, their spirits emboldened by shared conviction, a syncopated symphony echoing through the darkness. As officers pulled forth evidence of the sinister practices, I watched Timothy's composure dissolve. The wickedness he attempted to cloak behind charm and warmth now burned bare in the square, piercing the hearts of the townspeople. Those whispering secrets transformed into raging cries for accountability. I felt a surge of relentless hope as I refrained from stepping back, knowing the shadows could no longer reach us. "We will not rest until these actions are recognized," I implored to the crowd, emphasis lacing my voice. "Tonight, we surface our truths together." As clarity emerged from confusion, Cedar Grove began to nurture a sense of community resilience, a belief tethered to shared survival. Though warmed by the stories of old, they hardened against the cycles of ritual and darkness that would attempt to infiltrate again. That evening marked a turning point, a line etched in the earth beneath Cedar Grove, a promise manifesting itself into change that could not be silenced. The rain fell gently, washing away remnants of the past while unearthing the potential for a brighter dawn. Chapter 6, Legacy and Reflection. As Cedar Grove shone under the fresh light of dawn, the ripples from Timothy Green's downfall transformed the town in profound ways. No longer would secrets be veiled behind polite smiles. The unity forged in darkness held the key to renewal. Sarah Green's safe return marked the beginning of healing, but it didn't erase the scars of fear sown deeply in the hearts of many. A collective reckoning united the townsfolk as they turned their grief into action. Memorials were erected near the square, each dedicated to the children whose laughter had once faded beneath the shadows of hidden rituals. With every visit, townsfolk gently placed flowers, tokens of resilience, reminders of the journey thus far. One evening, I stood before the new memorial, absorbing the collective ache that seeped into the soil of Cedar Grove. Anna joined me. "This place is forever changed," she said softly, eyes scanning the horizon for hope. "But perhaps that change will lead us toward a better future." Indeed, the writing of a new chapter unfurled before us. I witnessed families bloom anew, widespread discussions igniting around safety, affirmation, and vigilance, embers kindling into flames illuminating tomorrow's promise. Laws were implemented, and a network of community organizations filled the gaps left by fear, placing children's safety at the forefront of Cedar Grove's identity. As I continued my documentation, I found myself reflecting on the intricate tapestry that defined this place. Cedar Grove had weathered storms and emerged on the other side ready to embrace the dawn, fortified against what sought to bind it to darkness. Through reflections shared in town hall discussions and heartfelt gatherings, I began to grasp that stories intertwine deeply within every community. They possess the power to shape destinies. It is incumbent upon us to show up as guardians of truth, moving forward in solidarity as echoes of those who came before us guide the path. In time, Cedar Grove stood strong, undaunted by the shadows of yesterday, embracing a future that breathed light into every nook and cranny where darkness once festered. Together, they became stewards of vigilance, crafting a sanctuary where laughter prevailed once again. Because what hides behind a perfect smile can be the darkest secret of all, but in confronting that darkness lies the potential for rebirth, a relentless reminder that even the heaviest shadows cannot resist the draw of light. In Cedar Grove, a new legacy was born, one based on courage, vigilance, and the eternal pursuit of justice. Chapter 1, The Town in the Perfect Facade. Cedar Grove thrived under the cloak of its serene exterior, a town where laughter danced through the air and golden fields embraced the sun. Families greeted one another warmly, their connections seemingly woven from the fabric of shared hopes and dreams. Yet the town's facade could not shield it from the reverberations of a darker past, a history lurking just out of sight. At the helm was Timothy Green, a figure both revered and feared. His broad shoulders and boisterous laughter spoke of strength, drawing people toward him. Margaret, his wife, adorned the home with her culinary talents, hosting gatherings that glowed with family warmth. But within their household, unease brewed beneath the surface, a testament to the secrets tightly held in its depths. I began to dig deeper into the whispers that floated amidst the bustling squares. Curiosity pulled me toward the greens, enveloped in tension I sensed but could not fully articulate. People spoke of their children growing distant, of shadows crossing their innocent smiles. "Sarah used to be so bright," lamented Lisa, a neighbor. "Now she just looks scared." The unsettling shift in the once vibrant community ignited my determination to uncover the archetypes of fear buried beneath the town's serene image. As I sought guidance from locals like Abigail, the matriarchal figure whose stories span generations, I learned that Cedar Grove had a history of shadows, tales of rituals practiced long ago, when whispers of darkness lingered on the lips of ancestors. "Children go missing in the night," Abigail warned, her voice laced with an intensity that captured attention. "Things we thought buried arise anew when the winds shift, we must remember." Her words pierced through the falsely light-hearted atmosphere, revealing the cracks sheltered beneath prismatic facades. Cedar Grove deserved to acknowledge those shadows rather than cower from them. Chapter 2: The Cracks Appear. Cedar Grove pulsated with an undercurrent of dread, a tide of fear seeping into daily life. Parents clutched their children tightly, exchanging furtive glances, whispers crackling with concern. The laughter that once thrived amongst families now danced with a hint of apprehension, their smiles strained. I sought the truth buried deeper in the soil, often speaking with schoolchildren who became conduits of information. "Sarah doesn't come to play anymore," spoke Jacob, one of her former friends. "I saw her yesterday. She was staring out her window like she was waiting for something." The stakes ramped up with every conversation. I connected with local historians, combing through accounts of Cedar Grove's foundations, piecing together fragments of forgotten stories. The more time I spent in the library reviewing archives, the more echoes of lament rushed back to the surface, rituals once deemed long dead resurfacing in modern whispers. My resolve strengthened as I realized the urgency behind Timothy's family. They harbored more than pride, they buried a legacy of darkness. It was during one unassuming afternoon that I stumbled upon an old journal documenting the practices of settlers, stories of offerings to appease spirits, invoking ancient customs in exchange for bountiful harvests. The words crossed my mental landscape like an intricate web, each thread intertwining their fate with that of their ancestors' beliefs. As I unraveled these stories, I decided to confront the Green family, seeking them out in hopes they would shed light on what had become of their daughter and their past. I dressed carefully for the occasion, attending a community gathering at their home, feigning casual conversation as I approached Timothy. "Your family has long been dear to our town," I began, gauging his reaction, "but rumors have surfaced concerns for your children." The laughter in his eyes clouded over, a flicker of defensiveness surfacing. "We keep our family traditions close, you wouldn't understand." The words clung to me, paralyzing the air between us. Unspoken truths lingered like ghosts in the corners of our dialogue. I sensed it then, the walls of Cedar Grove were closing in and we were quickly racing against a tide of secrecy. Chapter 3: The Breaking Point. The moment Charles Green went missing marked a pivotal juncture in Cedar Grove, a fracture exposing the fear that lay tightly wrapped around the town. A pall hung over the community, eyes darting toward every shadow, whispers growing louder by the hour. The day he vanished was unlike any other. It felt as though the very sun had lost its brilliance. "I swear I heard chanting last night," Anna breathed, a mixture of fear and determination evident. "I thought it was just my imagination, but now," she trailed off, eyes wide with realization. Motivated by the urgency for truth, I convened a gathering in the town square, drawing the community together. Tension crackled as stories poured forth, tales of shadowy figures seen near the Greens' property, of whispers that rolled through the trees, inviting dread into every heart. "We cannot remain silent any longer," I declared, vowing to confront Timothy again. Cedar Grove could no longer stay blind. Our collective strength must confront the lingering evil that had crept up like tendrils of mist. The time for shadows has passed. We need to seek out Sarah and Charles. As those gathered solidified their resolve, we decided to raid the Green property that very night. Armed with lanterns and courage, we ventured forth under the cloak of darkness, determined to unearth any secrets buried deep within. When we arrived at the Green home, the air felt electric, the tension ratcheting up every time footsteps echoed on the porch. Timothy emerged from the shadows, his anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "What's the meaning of this?" he spat, eyes wild and fearful. Your family's practices and shadows can't remain hidden, I shot back, heart racing as fear fueled my resolve. We demand the truth. With a deep breath, I pressed forward. Timothy's stance shifted, his world unraveling before him. I could see the cracks forming in his facade, cracking open the possibility of revelation. Don't cross that threshold, he warned, raising his hands in protest, but not before we exploded through the front door, each of us desperate to find our missing children. Chapter 4 The Truth Uncovered. A chaos of movement erupted as we pushed into the green home's dark recesses. Timber creaked beneath our weight as we swept through rooms filled with once cherished objects, memories now coated with a layer of discomfort. The walls, like the inhabitants, concealed a disquiet far too deep to ignore. As we descended into the cellar, a lingering chill licked at our skin, anticipation dancing in the air. Tension hummed like an electric wire as I felt the unmistakable pulse of history surrounding us. There, illuminated by flickering lanterns, lay remnants of something ancient, symbols lining the stone walls, dark stains marking the altar at the center. I felt an all-consuming dread wrap around me as the remnants of macabre practices became visible. The tales I had unearthed whispered back, rituals steeped in sacrifice. Timothy stood at the center, a figure once surrounded by power now stripped bare, his chaos untethered from control. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice hollow of bravado. "This is for the prosperity of the town, the spirits must be appeased." A resolute anger gripped the townsfolk as we began to grasp the depth of the horror Timothy unleashed. "You've sacrificed our children," a voice cried out, matching the resonance of Timothy's own crazed proclamations. Our cries filled the walls, the darkness that had once embraced Cedar Grove retracting into the past. It had no place in our collective hopes for the future. Tremors of disbelief and anger flooded the atmosphere as we began to break through the chains of his manipulation. In that moment, I realized the true essence of the town had not vanished. It merely awaited a spark to rekindle its light. We were ready to follow through, the collective will of Cedar Grove forged in fire, a vessel of resilience ready to embrace every piece of truth unearthed. Chapter 5 The Raid and Reckoning. As dawn broke, Aurora cast its warm light over Cedar Grove, illuminating the remnants of an unquiet night. The townsfolk came together under the banner of justice, eager to confront the remnants of Timothy Green's tainted legacy. With law enforcement rallied behind us, we made our way to the Green property, a reckoning not just for the Greens but for every soul burdened by secrets. As we walked with purpose towards the crack between past and present, whispers of fear slowly transformed into a chorus of hope. The doors to the cellar swung open, revealing not only a trove of ritualistic evidence but fragments of lives lost, each step resonating with the courage to reclaim what remained hidden. Timothy's protests filled the air, desperately latching onto the threads of authority that once flowed freely from his fingertips, now slipping through like grains of sand. As officers collected evidence, I felt the last vestiges of Timothy's hold disperse like mist clinging to the ground. His influence eroded in the face of the town's united strength, voices rising to demand accountability for the horrors etched into our past. Eyes of the community flickered with determination, every face bore witness to the realities that had resided beneath the town in silence. I could sense hearts awakening, the synergy of collective action igniting within the fabric of Cedar Grove. The proceedings shifted from mere reflection on the past to proactive steps forward. Town meetings ignited, advocacy for children's rights surged as foundations began to form. Cedar Grove became a beacon of resilience, a community uniting to silence the darkness permanently. As I watched the neighboring families pull together, supporting one another amid the tumult, I understood the essence of strength lay within their shared vulnerability. We were all inextricably linked, bound by responsibility to nurture a future unmarred by shadows of the past. Chapter 6 Legacy and Reflection. In the weeks that followed Timothy Green's arrest, Cedar Grove emerged transformed, infused with a sense of empowerment that pulsed through the town like lifeblood. Memorials sprang up to honor the shadows who had lingered too long. Instead, we vowed to protect the laughter of children and the innocence that defined generations. I strolled through the square, lively chatter enveloping me. Families gathered, their laughter echoing against the backdrop of baked goods emerging from Anna's kitchen, a soothing balm after the storm. It was then that I realized Cedar Grove had forged a resilient identity, blooming anew from the ashes of fear. At a community meeting that evening, parents and guardians spoke of their rallied commitment to protect their children. "We cannot let this darkness reemerge," Anna proclaimed. "We will stand vigilant, united against any forces that threaten our town." The resolve leveled into a concerted effort. Youth programs sprang to life, community involvement surged, reinforcing that our shared history would not bind us but empower us. Through every story, every recollection of pain, Cedar Grove painted a tapestry of resilience, emerging from the depths of despair. As I stood before the memorial one last time, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. The lessons of vulnerability, tenacity, and collective courage began to crystallize into something beautiful and poignant. For the past may linger, but it no longer held dominion over their future. What began as whispers had exploded into conversations, a steadfast commitment to a brighter tomorrow carried within the spirit of Cedar Grove. For in facing the darkness, hope and healing grew vibrant, illuminating paths once shadowed. Behind smiles cast against the sun now lay the stories of survival and vigilance forged together, reminding us always to stand firm in the face of adversity. This was Cedar Grove, a steadfast community, forever resolute in ensuring that the echoes of laughter would reign without fear, rising against the darkness that once lay concealed beneath the soil. Chapter 1. Cedar Grove stood with the proud resilience of a town reborn. The sunlit streets brimmed with laughter and life, yet the weight of collective grief still lingered just beneath the surface. Families gathered again, but there were stories to tell, pasts to confront, and the shadows had not entirely relinquished their grip. Timothy Green, once a familiar face, now languished in prison, his reign of terror stripped bare. Margaret Green's fate remained uncertain, her silence an echo of pathways taken long ago. But even as Cedar Grove moved forward, resolve began to fracture, old wounds reopening as people grappled with the fallout. One afternoon, as children played in the vibrant park at the heart of town, I approached Anna Riley, the steadfast teacher whose insights had guided so many. "What do we do now? How do we safeguard our children against darkness?" Her brow furrowed. "We must remain vigilant, Daniel. The whispers of the past will always haunt us unless we shed light on the stories hidden in shadows." As I spoke with various townspeople, I learned that unease had been stirring beneath the surface, weaving itself through conversations laden with murmurs of secrets. Many families began recounting strange occurrences since the Greens' arrest, dreams of shadows lurking, visions of familiar faces shrouded in darkness. I recalled those echoes. They enveloped Cedar Grove, stirred again as the month progressed. Fear crept back, seeping into pockets of the town that had dared believe they were safe. "Are the threads of this darkness being sewn back together?" I murmured, grappling with the urgency to expose whatever lingered just beyond the veil. Chapter 2. Greed and whispers coiled tightly within the embraced communities. A gathering was convened to address the palpable tension, the air thick with trepidation as townsfolk exchanged worried glances. Each face reflected a yearning for clarity, aching with desire to put their fears to rest. In that gathering, our community figures faced a crossroads. "We cannot let the past consume us. Cedar Grove must redefine its path," proclaimed Mayor Thompson, a steadfast leader obedient to the preservation of the town's spirit. "The darkness can return if we let apathy take root. We must reignite the light among us." As discussions turned towards formative actions, a resounding agreement solidified among attendees. "Let us instate a community watch," one mother suggested with trembling hands. "A group of vigilant individuals committed to child safety so that no one suffers in silence." Excitement rippled through the crowd. Names were suggested, aspirations blossomed, responsibility began to weave into the fabric of Cedar Grove's identity once more. Yet that same afternoon I witnessed a familiar face in the crowd, Margaret Green. She appeared distant, thin strands of resolve fraying under the weight of her own suffering. While she maintained a low profile, I noted the shadows that clung to her, whispering secrets of old. I approached her cautiously, feeling the tension crackle between us like static. "Margaret, are you well?" Her gaze lifted to meet mine, shimmering with unspoken burdens. "Daniel," she started, a quiver evident in her voice, "I'm haunted, I cannot escape the memories." In that moment I recognized both fear and vulnerability emanating from her in waves. "You can find your way back," I encouraged her gently. "This town can heal if we all confront the truth together." It was a call to action, a responsibility to share burdens, and therein lay a journey of discovery that would reshape Cedar Grove once more. Chapter 3. Through the months that followed, Cedar Grove stood united in its resolve to heal, even as reminders of the past crept into the present. The newly formed community watch took shape, individuals committed to the safety and well-being of children becoming vigilant guardians. The Green family's shadow loomed large. Margaret struggled, oscillating between moments of lucidity and deep reflection that pulled her inward. "What if people don't trust me?" she confided as we strolled along the now familiar park, an air of hope filling my lungs. "The past is not defined by your choices, Margaret," I reassured her softly. "It's the actions you take now that can foster trust." Despite the optimism, unease simmered within the town. Whispers spread like wildfire, dark threads tightening around familiar relationships. Rumors festered, each story amplifying fear and regret, concerning dreams unbidden and spectral figures rising from the tangle of shadows. At the monthly community meeting, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety, eyes darting around the room as various families engaged in spirited discussions about securing the town's past. "We must protect our children," a father insisted vehemently. "We cannot afford to let those shadows creep back in." Little did we know that shadows can twist into danger, clinging to the unsuspecting as memories lingered. In the subsequent weeks, something shifted in the air. A discomfort washed over me, punctuated by an evasive sense of dread. I learned that several children had grown increasingly disoriented, finding themselves awakening at odd hours, murmuring about unseen figures beckoning from the woods. Sensing that desperation deepened, I returned to Abigail, intent on seeking counsel regarding the recently unearthed experiences. "Tell me about the old stories again," I urged gently, hoping to find insight hidden within her cherished memories. She nodded knowingly, the shadows of the past flickering within her eyes. "Those who have danced with darkness invite its claws to cling. We must remain vigilant, but we also must remember it's never too late to confront the past." As the echoes of ancestral stories resonated deeper, Cedar Grove's courage began to swell, binding the town together. It was a collective flame fighting against any resurgence of darkness. Each gathering, each connection reinforced that they were no longer alone. Chapter 4. One crisp autumn evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of deep violet, the town gathered in the square, united against the apprehensive shadows lurking at the edges of Cedar Grove. Lanterns hung from trees, illuminating the gathering with warm light. I stood alongside the community, watching on as Anna welcomed everyone, a mantle of authority cloaked over her, her passion stoking the flames of yesterday's fears. "To confront our past, we must understand the roots of our darkness," she declared. "Unity is the key. Together we will ensure the evil that plagued us can never return." With her voice echoing in the hearts of those assembled, I began to grasp the fresh resolve blossoming in Cedar Grove. Hands clasped, eyes locked in unwavering connection, Cedar Grove would face the darkness together, allowing each story to be woven into their newly formed tapestry. But amid the warmth, an uninvited chill swept through the crowd. The tendrils of doubt brushed against my skin, and I couldn't shake the sensation that we were on the precipice of something vast. As the night deepened, stories unfolded, but shadows hastened to silence their calls. The chatter amongst the crowd turned speculative. What if the past returns? What if the green legacy? Before those words could take root, I felt a sudden urgency press on my chest. "We are stronger now," I cried out. "Voices uplifted in unity can cast aside despair. We will hold each other to account, breaking those chains together." Fires ignited in the hearts surrounding me, and laughter echoed under the dusk sky. Yet, with every heartfelt promise made on that fated night, a silent figure watched from the shadows, a reminder that even the heaviest darkness must answer to the light. Chapter 5. As dawn broke, light poured into Cedar Grove, illuminating the town transformed by the events of the previous weeks. The community strengthened, embraced within the bonds forged through shared experience. Parents and guardians, emboldened by their commitment to protection, organized new educational programs for children, teaching them the importance of vigilance, awareness, and bravery. But even amidst the renewal and varied events aimed at celebration, rumors persisted, an inescapable force reminding the townsfolk that shadows still lingered. Nightmares twisted through the childhoods of Cedar Grove's youth, creeping into their dreams uninvited. There were murmurs of dark shapes, echoes of voices unseen. I sought out Margaret and engaged her in deeper conversations. Margaret, you know the green legacy lingers. How can we address it without confronting its history? She nodded, murky clouds congealing in her eyes. We could reclaim the cellar, connect it to history by allowing it to become a research space, a testament against betrayal, she proposed, an ember reigniting within. Days turned into weeks, during which newfound responsibilities evolved from dreams into action. The community began renovations, the old cellar transformed into a historical center dedicated to remembrance, a learning space for children to engage actively with Cedar Grove's true past. As the cellar took shape, a sense of peace settled across the town. Families visited often, breaking bread and sharing stories of history that had once been untouched. But deep down, I remained acutely aware that the specter of the past still lingered, lying in wait for the moment it could reclaim dominance. In that strange way, the foundation of truth remained, reaching out to the edges of Cedar Grove like roots beneath the soil. As I visited the center each day inspecting the emerging design, I felt a pull. One day, it would be essential to confront the darkness that had claimed Timothy Green's life as well. Chapter 6. Autumn transitioned into winter and Cedar Grove emerged forged anew, yet the chill in the air grew fierce, battering the bricks of memories still poorly understood. Each person's commitment to the truth deepened, yet the unease in my heart mirrored the frost on the ground. As the townspeople frequented the historical center, every story shared brushed against my mind, a fabric carefully stitched to represent resilience and generational lessons. Yet the deeper echoes gripped me, leading to nights spent aware of dark forces that could claim sanctuary in silence. I summoned the courage to approach Anna during a town-wide meeting, calling for unity against the rising tide of darkness, of fear. Together, we must remember the stories we've woven into this place and continue guarding against shadows, I urged passionately. The power of knowledge can shield us. But murmurs began to swell, people hesitated to fully confront these truths. What if it brings them back? Someone cried out, the air grating with anxiety. Doubt tangled in the atmosphere, coiling around the vibrant spirit of Cedar Grove, threatening to suffocate newfound progress. Then an elderly woman stood, her hands shaking slightly. I knew the Greens long before any of us did. Timothy may have strayed, but Margaret, she was always the one to hold the warmth here. Her voice trembled, echoing through silence. We must tread carefully, don't let fear of shadows blind you from understanding. In that moment, I recognized the balancing act Cedar Grove faced, acknowledging the darkness while not allowing it to define their future. The past had cast long shadows, and the selected tact offered one path forward, to excavate the roots of the darkness together. We would confront history, courage would pave the road. We would nurture the stories that illuminated our purpose, and though darkness would tempt silence, together we would knit the tapestry of Cedar Grove into something radiant. And so, we forged onward, hearts intertwined, ready to embrace whatever emerged from the tales. Because every story carries weight, embodied within it memories, hurt, healing, and the relentless pursuit of truth that can light even the heaviest shadows. For Cedar Grove was not merely a setting, it was an emblem of resilience, a reminder that hope arises when hearts open to collective voices. We would move forward, unveiling the power within, ensuring that while shadows may always linger, light held the true measure of our identity. Through the boundless connection shared, the tapestry of Cedar Grove would thrive, resilient in the embrace of shared stories, forever reaching toward the light. As the seasons turned, Cedar Grove continued to blossom, fortified by the efforts of its people. The historical center became a cornerstone of community identity, filled with stories echoing both joy and sorrow. Families participated in workshops designed to teach children about vigilance, empathy, and the legacies that shaped their town, a poignant reminder of resilience against the darkness they had faced. The stories told there formed a tapestry of shared experience, a powerful thread in the fabric of Cedar Grove. Children danced through the park again, unburdened by the shadows that once clung to their joyous laughter. Their voices filled the air, infusing it with light, a sound that sang of hope and renewal. Margaret Green gradually integrated herself back into the community, participating in events as healing crept into her heart. "I want to embrace this new beginning, even if my past remains complicated," she shared during one gathering, her voice steady but reflective. "I'm here to learn and grow alongside all of you." Recognition of shared responsibility became integral to Cedar Grove's fabric. Conversations flourished, not only about the past but also about how they could build a future unmarred by shadows. Plans were proposed to create a mentorship program where older generations shared hard-won wisdom with youth, creating bonds that would strengthen over time. The cycle of remembrance deepened as the town commemorated those lost during the dark reign of Timothy Green. Annual events filled with storytelling and remembrance would usher in a legacy honoring lost innocence, an emblem of vigilance against complacency. As winter melted into spring, the vibrant colors of Cedar Grove emerged anew, a testament to the indomitable spirit of its people. But even as joy flourished, residents held a shared ethos: to remain ever watchful against potential darkness, rooted firmly in their commitment to transparency and understanding. And just as the echoes of the past intermingled with the vibrancy of today, I found solace in knowing that the journey of Cedar Grove, one marked by resilience and demands for truth, would continue to unfold. The future held promise, an ever-deepening connection among families, as the town stood united in its quest both for remembrance and for the strength to look toward the horizon unafraid. In the quiet moments when darkness threatens to encroach, the flicker of a candle, a symbol of hope, would forever light the way. It was a reminder that behind every perfect smile lay a story worth sharing, a history woven into the very essence of Cedar Grove, where shadows may linger but light would always prevail.